As you know, there's now a vacancy on the Supreme Court.
As President Trump prepares to reveal his Supreme Court nominee, a Texas abortion law is getting new attention.
It will be a landmark decision at that point because it will clearly set the Supreme Court on a path of where they're going to go on this issue.
How legislation from the Lone Star State could set the stage for a key challenge of abortion rights in America. Congress prepares for a new battle over immigration reform, but one Texan does not see a solution before November.
And if we want to change the law in a humane and reasonable way, the only way to do that is to change the lawmakers.
Why one Texas lawmaker says voters hold the key to a solution on immigration. Hello and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen in for Josh Hinkle. President Trump says he will reveal his Supreme Court nominee Monday night in a live primetime address. Even before the announcement, people are gearing up for a new battle over abortion. Critics say the president's published list of candidates is proof that he wants the court to overturn decades-old abortion rights cases. But White House aides say the president is not asking about specific cases as he makes his decision.
He's looking for individuals that have the right intellect, the right temperament, and that will uphold the Constitution.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz endorsed Utah Senator Mike Lee for the vacancy, but Lee is not believed to be on the president's shortlist. Abortion rights advocates in Texas believe they're in for a battle, and regardless of who Trump picks.
We have already seen access to abortion decimated. We're at a point now in this country where the option to access abortion safely and legally is on the line. That is a very clear and present threat with this SCOTUS vacancy.
A law passed in Texas last year may already be setting the stage for a key challenge on abortion rights. Senate Bill 8 was a set of comprehensive regulations on abortion, including a ban on fetal tissue donation and required fetal remains to be buried or cremated. One provision banned dilation and evacuation abortion. That's a medical procedure that uses surgical tools to remove a fetus. It's the most common method for second trimester abortions. Texas lawmakers voted to outlaw the procedure, except in cases where the fetus was already deceased. Abortion rights groups challenged that part of the law, and a federal judge ruled it was unconstitutional. Attorney General Ken Paxton has appealed the ruling. The case could go to the Supreme Court. And joining us now is one of the co-authors of Texas's newest anti-abortion law, State Senator Charles Perry from Lubbock. Thanks for joining us.
It's good to be here.
Now, you've said before that Senate Bill 8 is the landmark decision in the making. What is so important about Senate Bill 8?
So I want to clarify, Chairman Charles Swertner's was the author of Senate Bill 8, and the House obviously signed off on it. Inside of Senate Bill 8 is the dismemberment abortion bill that I had in testimony and hearings, and it was actually amended into SB 8. That's the portion that was challenged and is currently sitting at the Fifth Circuit for review from the judiciary. So we've got Senate Bill 8 passed, other than the dismemberment portion, which was my bill that was amended in, sitting at the Fifth Circuit, that we expect to probably come out of the Fifth Circuit favorable to Texas legislature based on the hearings and testimony and some other things that were precedent setting prior to having that bill heard, and move it up to the Supreme Court, hopefully.
And what are the measures that are important that's going to take it all the way up to the Supreme Court? Why is it on that track?
So multiple levels. Number one, it goes to the heart of the abortion procedure itself. And Justice Kennedy, that we're losing on the 31st, I believe, of this month, set the precedent, or opened the door, if you will, that stated that Texas has a vested interest in every life in the state. And at that point, that extended to the unborn. So he opened the door for the discussion of protecting the innocent and the unborn in the womb with that decision point in previous rulings. You take that one step further, and torturous was a term or a language that was introduced into that. The dismemberment bill that I filed and was passed out of the Senate and House that was ultimately amended in SB 8 goes to the heart of that torturous, and also reaffirms the right that Texas has to protect its unborn. So those are the two facets that are a little bit unique to the dismemberment abortion bill. So it's appropriate to have it in the Fifth Circuit. We hope to get the ruling that we expect, and we do believe, because of precedents of other judicial rulings in the Supreme Court, that we're going to get this one heard. And it will be a landmark decision at that point, because it will clearly set the Supreme Court on a path of where they're going to go on this issue. Right now, we pretty much were always working to Justice Kennedy and what we believed he might see or might rule on particular issues. But this is one of those areas that once it goes up to the Supreme Court and a ruling is made, it'll send a clear message across the country as to where we think the abortion issue could go.
Give me an idea of the stakes. So if your side wins in the Supreme Court over SB 8, what does that open the door to next session? What would be the goal then?
So if Fifth Circuit gets it to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court were to rule on it, which, let's clarify, I think there's a lot of misnomers out there. We want constitutionalists of jurors, especially at the Supreme Court level. We want constitutionalists. Conservative and liberal have been interjected into this discussion. Obviously, a constitutionalist typically leans a little more conservative. So I want someone to interpret the Constitution the way it was meant to be and not legislate from the bench, and that's what we've been seeing over the last several decades. So that said, we want this matter played out at the Supreme Court. So where it goes from there, I think that if you have a constitutionally driven judiciary rather than a legislative interpretation and mindset of changing law through the judiciary, you could see states' rights interjected into that. And I think that would be probably the best outcome, to where you put this particular issue back to states. You know, states were meant to have that power, meant to have that authority. So I see that as one path. The second path is obviously anytime you protect life and the unborn, you've made steps in the right way. I think it opens up that discussion on a more deeper level as the partial birth abortion ban kind of reached, where people recognize that procedure for what it was and what it did, and the public outcry against that particular procedure got it to the Supreme Court, got it heard. So it's a win all the way around. Mm-hmm. That's the stakes, I think, on our side, and I think you cannot underestimate a constitutionally driven judiciary rather than one that likes to legislate, putting that back to the states' rights, and that would just open the door up for a whole lot of other issues. So I see that as the real plus and the win, if you will, if we can get to that level.
Senator Charles Perry, thanks for joining us.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Texans in Congress prepare for a new battle in the immigration debate.
I hope it sinks in to the president. It sinks in to our Republican leaders that it's got to be bipartisan.
President Trump wants action now. That has people on Capitol Hill looking for a compromise deal to move forward. Mexico has a new president, and he's promising big changes for his country. Why his new policies could also shake things up on our side of the border. Mexico has a new president who's promising big changes for his country, but the decision could also have a big impact here in the United States. Washington correspondent Alexandra Limon takes a closer look at the relationship between the leaders on both sides of the border and how that relationship could reshape the immigration debate.
Mexico has a new president-elect, Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
I think he's going to try and help us with border.
The newly elected Mexican leader said in a tweet after the election that he received a call from Donald Trump, and they spoke for half an hour. He also says he proposed exploring an agreement to generate jobs in Mexico and therefore reduce migration. Mexico's ambassador to the United States, Jerónimo Gutiérrez, echoed that message.
We will find common ground even on the most complicated issues.
Some of those issues will include immigration and President Trump's proposed border wall. President Trump also says Mexico should help stop Central American immigrants from reaching the U.S. to seek asylum.
We have unbelievably bad border laws, immigration laws, the weakest in the world.
Public comments since Mexico's election have remained friendly, but in the past, López Obrador has vowed to stand up to President Trump. He published a book called Oye Trump, which means listen Trump, and he's called the president erratic and arrogant. Whether immigration policy will be reshaped by the relationship between the two leaders remains to be seen. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
Leaders from Texas are already planning meetings with López Obrador's transition team. We spoke via Skype with a UT Austin professor who studies Mexican elections about the change in leadership.
Texas is certainly the most important single state for economic relations with Mexico. There are interests on both sides of the border in maintaining and expanding that relationship. I think a fair amount will have to do with Governor Abbott's ability to influence the Trump administration when it comes to NAFTA negotiations.
President Trump says he wants to delay NAFTA negotiations until after the midterm elections this November. A new call on Congress to take action on immigration policy sets the stage for a fierce fight on Capitol Hill.
He says Democrats need to fix this. He's the guy who broke it. He could fix it in a moment by abandoning some of these racist policies that he's pursued.
We'll hear from one Texas congressman about the battle to come. The Trump administration strikes a blow against affirmative action in college admissions.
That's a problem because then you begin to kind of sweep away students that are lower income.
But the University of Texas is sticking with its admissions process. How the decision from the White House is changing the debate on campus. President Trump aimed one of his latest Twitter attacks at Congress. The message, get on the ball when it comes to immigration reform. A Texan who's one of the president's strongest supporters in Congress agrees that lawmakers need to take action, but he's not sure they can get it done. Anna Wernicke has the story from Washington.
Phil, President Trump is putting pressure on Republicans in Congress to pass immediate immigration reform. But lawmakers I spoke with from both parties say that's not going to happen anytime soon. President Trump blasted lawmakers Thursday morning, tweeting, "Congress, fix our insane immigration laws now."
We got to quit talking.
Texas Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert says the president is right.
We have got to get him the money, got to get him the ability. Build the wall where it's needed, secure the border.
But Texas Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar says that's not going to happen until both parties are willing to truly work on a compromise.
And until we get to that where we actually have a bill that's written by both Democrats and Republicans, we're not going to have anything done.
Congress made 2 attempts to pass immigration reform in June, but neither of those bills passed the House.
I hope it sinks in to the president. It sinks in to our Republican leaders that it's got to be bipartisan.
And Gohmert agrees Congress isn't any closer to passing an immigration overhaul than they were months ago.
The president's doing what he can. He hadn't gotten the support he needs from a majority in the House and Senate.
We're ready to work with the president.
Cuellar says it really comes down to 2 issues. Democrats want full protections for dreamers, children who arrived in the U.S. illegally with their parents. And Republicans want money to fund the president's border wall.
It's not going to go away. It's an emotional topic.
Cuellar says the best strategy moving forward is splitting the controversial issues into smaller, more narrow bills instead of trying to bundle them all together under one massive immigration package. For State of Texas in Washington, I'm Anna Wernicke.
The fight over immigration reform has been going on for years without agreement, but can this year be different? For perspective, we're joined by Congressman Lloyd Doggett, Democrat from Austin. Thanks for joining us, sir.
So good to be with you.
Now, the president is calling on Congress to take action on immigration reform again. Now, do you think this time is going to be different and we can do something before November?
Well, I think there is a way to resolve immigration reform. We need to change the immigration law, and if you want to change the law in a humane and reasonable way, the only way to do that is to change the lawmakers. So it's unlikely to happen before November. It can happen after November if enough people participate to change the people that have been blocking this, that have been enabling President Trump to have this family separation policy, who have been with either their silence or their applause supporting his bigotry, his demonization of foreigners, and his placing children in cages.
So you just say that there's no room for compromise before November and we just got to settle this thing in the election. You're already kind of walking away from the table?
There is plenty of room for compromise, but as long as Speaker Ryan blocks that compromise on behalf of Donald Trump, as he has done as recently as last week, no, there is no way to achieve a compromise unless you call a compromise wasting $25 billion on Donald Trump's wall and encouraging the kind of bigotry and anti-foreigner attitude that he has exemplified every day. He says Democrats need to fix this. He's the guy who broke it. He could fix it in a moment by abandoning some of these racist policies that he's pursued, but he's been unwilling to do that. And as long as he has a Republican Congress that can find no wrong in any of his tweets or insults or bad policies, this will continue to occur.
Now, we just heard from your fellow House Democrat, Henry Cuellar. He said the debate over immigration reform comes down to really two issues that are in front of Congress right now. Democrats want to protect dreamers, and Republicans want money for the border wall. If Republicans say, Congressman Doggett, legal status for dreamers for the border wall, what do you say? Is that a compromise you could do?
Well, first, his analysis is very oversimplified. It's much more complex than that. As you know, about 6 years ago, the Senate passed a bipartisan compromise bill for comprehensive immigration reform. The Republicans in the House refused to let us consider that measure. If such a measure came up that included some modest border security measures, I don't believe in open borders. I think we have to have a reasonable system for entering this country. I could support that. But the idea that Donald Trump would hold our dreamers hostage, their future, all that they are contributing right now in our community, that he would hold them hostage along with these children in cages in order to get $25 billion ransom for a border wall, that's wrong, and I would not support that.
Now, some people on the left in your party have been recently calling for the abolishing ICE. Is that something that you would support?
We will always need to have some enforcement agency, whatever it might be called, to police our borders and to take care of those who enter our country improperly. I understand the concerns that many people voice about ICE. I've dealt with them personally. I've seen their unresponsiveness, their indifference in carrying out Donald Trump's wrongful policies. But I think that the call for abolition of ICE has played somewhat into his hands, with tweets suggesting that Democrats want to turn over communities to MS-13 and will be after abolishing the police next. That is nonsense. We need to have our flag, our pride in our country, and our determination to keep every neighborhood secure first and foremost. One of the reasons that I reject the Trump administration policies is that when you talk to police chiefs, other local law enforcement officers, they realize these harsh policies against immigrants actually make our communities less safe. They make immigrants less willing to cooperate in reporting crime. They're often the victims of crime. We need their cooperation and their participation. We basically need compromise, comprehensive immigration reform of the type the Senate approved so long ago. But I just don't believe that that can happen this year after Speaker Ryan blocked action on the Dreamers, and where so many Republicans are tied to Donald Trump in every way.
Congressman Doggett, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. So good to be with you.
A 180 from the federal government, now allowing colleges to leave race out as a consideration for admissions and enrollment decisions. An in-depth look at why the University of Texas says it's sticking with affirmative action. The University of Texas is sticking to its current admissions process, even as the Trump administration discourages schools from looking at race when they decide who to admit. But opponents of that kind of affirmative action see this as an opportunity to make a change. UT uses race as a factor in some of its admissions. This new move signals that the federal government wants colleges to use race-neutral factors. The debate could play out in the Supreme Court as it takes up a lawsuit alleging Harvard excludes Asian Americans to the benefit of other minority groups. Also, that court won't have Justice Anthony Kennedy, who is soon retiring. He was key in upholding UT's affirmative action policies, and now opponents say they have an ally in Washington. For years, the federal government supported UT's use of race in admissions to promote diversity. Not so anymore.
That's a problem, because then you begin to kind of sweep away students that are lower income that may not have the same opportunities that their white peers have.
Junior Marco Guajardo is the vice president of the University Democrats and says with so many qualified applicants, UT needs something to differentiate incoming freshmen. In his opinion, UT's racial makeup doesn't reflect the state's as it is, and this would make it worse.
It's not good for the barely 6% of black students at UT to look around and not see too many people that look like them.
The university successfully defended its policy at the Supreme Court in Fisher versus the University of Texas. But senior Sarab Sharma with UT's Young Conservatives of Texas says affirmative action has run its course. He helped organize a controversial affirmative action bake sale, different prices for different races, as a demonstration.
At some point, the society should have reached a level of racial reconciliation such that there are other metrics that are more appropriate.
In his opinion, the current process unfairly leaves some out.
Caucasians as well as Asians feel like they're getting the short end of the stick in the admissions process.
Not much will change tomorrow, but he says the news is a sign of shifting support. Studies show a significant wealth gap between African Americans and white Americans. According to the New York Times, for every $100 in white family wealth, black families hold just $5.04. An Economic Policy Institute study shows that more than 1 in 4 black households have zero or negative net worth. And that's compared to less than 1 in 10 for white families. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen. Josh Hinkle will be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.